Hey guys, welcome to another Achieve More podcast. My name is Anthony. You can find me on YouTube at Picksburgh, where I do a lot of cool travel videos with my fiance. Most recently, we just went to Australia, so there's a series of vlogs from there. Make sure you see everything we did in the land down under. And it's also the video home of the Achieve More podcast. So if you want to see how strikingly handsome the three gentlemen that you're going to listen to on this podcast are, you're going to have to come over to Picksburgh because that's where you can see our faces. And also with me, as always, is my co-host Michael over there at Huddle Card Collection. He has a YouTube channel where he opens up a lot of sports cards and deals with collectibles. He also has a podcast every Wednesday. You want to tell him about it, Michael?
Yeah, every Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time, we talk the card collecting hobby. We talk selling on eBay. We talk, buying sports cards. We also talk just regular sports. Also, it's a live show, so it's really interactive. Try and get guests on. We're always looking for guests. If not, interact with the audience that's in the chat and stuff, and just talk about whatever the hot topics are in the sports cards and sports segment, whatever it may be going on around that point in time.
Nice.
Yeah.
And guys, I highly suggest you check it out. It's amazing. And rumor has it there's going to be a special guest on there this week. So make sure you go to Huddle Card Collection and see who that special guest might be. Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. We have Brady Dahmer, who is an author and an agency owner with us. And Brady, I just really am excited to be able to ask you some questions today and just glean some of the knowledge that you have. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anthony and Michael. I'm excited to be here too and help your listeners. As much as I can. And I think, when we talked earlier, it was just let's walk through some problems and see how we can help everybody, through some of their blind spots. So, yeah.
Cool. So just to get started, tell us a little bit about your background, your upbringing, kind of what you're into, beyond just what you do. Tell us a little about the man behind all that.
Thanks so much. I'm an agency owner for over 30 years now, specifically in branding and marketing and communications. I've always had a passion for also teaching as well and mentoring. So as much as the agency is big and we deal with a lot of high level high-end clients, I always my roots are always very much in the the entrepreneurial mindset. And I think that was kind of the impetus for this book, is to kind of help some entrepreneurs and startups not make some of those mistakes, because it's just I was very fortunate early on. The very first job I had, the president of the company, of the agency that I worked at, was just, he had such a community mindset that he got me involved in being young and right out of school. He got me into the track of contributing and donating my time and being a part of a larger community and kind of giving back. And that was just kind of, it's been one of those things that rippled really throughout my entire career about as you move up, lend a hand and keep pulling everybody else up behind you. So that was kind of that's always been one of the mindsets that I've had. And hence 4 years ago I got a call from a friend of mine who was sort of in some trouble with her designer and contractor, and a light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh, I bet you a lot of other people have these questions as well. So I'm like, as I was doing research and looking at stuff, I sort of started to write this. What started off as a checklist then turned into this larger book to help entrepreneurs and startups and small businesses kind of not make the same mistakes that some of us have when working on marketing and branding and that kind of stuff. So it is it's about avoiding avoiding all the blind spots or those things that we kind of assume. And it just started to flesh into something bigger. And it just, tell you the truth, it kind of really was, it become very satisfying, because for me, it's like I said, I love to teach and mentor, and for me, this is kind of that opportunity to take myself from the a small group of people, to share the wealth of information that I've had and been able to kind of gather the 30 plus years and share it with everybody as they're just starting up too. So yeah.
That's really cool. What was it like that inspired you? Was it that one moment with your friend, or was there a specific moment in your own career where there was a specific blind spot that you were like, "Oh man, I didn't even notice this was happening," and then you had to do something to fix it?
No, good, good question. I think some of that, not to use the term lightly, but it's when someone asks you the question, all of a sudden you get or if you're if someone that you're mentoring asks you something, and then you get you get the PST, no, the PTSD from that question, be like, oh my God, I remember making this mistake then, or I made it, and all of a sudden that waterfall of bad memories come washing over
Yeah.
you of all the kind of mistakes that you had made in business. And they could have been easily avoided, but it's one of those things that, you kind of wish that you had learned, or, it's, you didn't learn the hard way. So that question turned into, oh, I wonder, I remember having to go through this and making some of these things. I bet other people have. And in that, as I started asking friends, they started sharing more stories, and it just became kind of evident that there was that gap between theory and practice, that we all kind of, we kind of learn things or watch somebody on YouTube do it, but it's all very theoretical till we're actually doing it ourselves. And there was that knowledge gap that I'm like, oh, there is. We get this high theory stuff, but there's nothing, the practical and how to do it. It's kind of, I'm a learn by doing kind of, person. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, but in that, we also try to skip over some of the theoretical stuff, or we don't sort of maybe learn as much as we probably should. So we just jump in, and in doing so, we tend to make kind of more mistakes. And this is the book is a documentation of that, but I've organized it in a way that's kind of really easy for someone to use and learn. So that's kind of, it's a collection of what not to do. In other words, how to avoid certain things. And that's, what it's about.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
In your opinion, when it comes to this, do the blind spots come from people not knowing, or that they are so focused on sometimes larger things that they forget some of these things?
I think another great question. So actually, there's a quote in the book where the blind spot's not what you don't know, but it's also to what everybody assumes that right? So it's the assumptions that we kind of, when we're talking to people, and we expect them to know, like, for instance, it's just it's the assumptions on both sides of the contractor, and when I say contractor or designer or anybody that you're working with, if they assume something, or you agree to something, but then you actually think of it in another way, in another sort of perspective or another term, but you assume it going the other way. So it's really it's about just making sure that there's good dialogue, and it's kind of, I wouldn't say in writing, but it's you're on equal footings, that it's understood in the exact same way. So those blind spots are the things when you assume that, for instance, very early on in my career, that I assumed that a client had proofread a brochure before it went to print. It got to print, and then as it got delivered, they were looking and they're reading through it and realizing the phone number was off by one digit. But here, I, as a designer, as I was printing this, I assumed that they had proofed it properly, and they had assumed that I had proofed it properly. So in that, because it was the impetus was on me, that was a very costly mistake that I had to kind of absorb in that project. So it's just about kind of almost detailing and list making. Like if anybody's knows anything about piloting, or even doctors, they have those lists when it comes to surgery or flying a plane, that the lists are there, or sort of to remind people the steps that one has to go through. So it's not sort of that's why the pilot and co-pilot, it's like, is this there? Check. And then that, so it's almost like a double positive when it comes to things, rather than sort of leaving it unknown. And that's when you leave it unknown, that's when it's the assumptions, and you can get into some messy stuff.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Are there some common blind spots that you notice a lot of companies kind of run into that lead to like failure or like delays in their projects?
Yeah, one of the things, yeah, for sure, and that's kind of one of the things that we kind of run into most is that when people do a light touch, or they don't really dive into some of the research at the very beginning of of the projects. I think with you guys with collectibles, it's like the more you know about not just the player but also the history of the card, the more you know even about the distribution, or the more insights that you have, the better decisions that you can make on purchasing a card or that group or things like that. So one of the things that we find most common is a lot of people when they're running their business, they don't go too far deep into understanding their market, understanding like who their competition is, who their clients might be, but really diving deep down into what those are. So those blind spots, because the more you know, the better decisions that you can make, and the more kind of, I don't want to say ambitious or risky, but the more interesting kind of things you can create without being safe about it. Because when you don't know anything, you're always safe about stuff. So as we know in marketing, and we all kind of, the most interesting, the most provocative, the most memorable campaigns are the ones that are a little bit out there, that take the risk, that become noticeable. But that's just done because they understand who their audience is and they're not playing it safe. So that they've been doing that deep research. And what the kind of maybe the blind spot, or what can come out of that, is that if you don't do that research, if you're always playing it safe, when you're always showing up in that way, you're really not, the investment that you have is not really going to something to build something. It's just going to be, you're just paying to show up, rather than is the investment is you're there to stand out, because that's how you drive more business. That's more clients and everything else. That's really how you grow. So that's one of the biggest things that we find is people don't know their market as deep as they should, right? So yeah, it's kind of that's one of the biggest ones that can probably cost people a lot of money.
That makes a lot of sense. Out of curiosity, like you personally, what advice would you have, like as far as go-to tips or like daily checklists or anything that you work on to make sure that you thrive, as a professional, as a business owner, as somebody that wants to continue to get better, but also to make sure that you're consistently staying as good as you were the day before as well? Because I know that oftentimes once you reach a certain level of success, you always see it in the NFL or, the MLB, a guy gets a big contract and then he gets complacent. So like what kind of things do you do on a daily basis to, not only stay consistent, but to motivate yourself to continue to grow?
Yeah, no, it's two things kind of came to mind, because I was just listening to someone talking about Kobe Bryant, in his heyday, and they were talking about how, they were talking about his workout routine, and he was hitting the gym at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, just running the drills, just doing that same thing, just doing, not, yeah, he was really leaning into what got him to where he, to where he is. And he just, one of those things that you just don't forget the mechanics of or what you did to get there. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like you said, we sometimes we make the money, we get the success, and then we kind of float, but we forget, like, there was an entire sort of engine or mechanics underneath that got us to where we are. But to keep it going, you kind of need to kind of, keep remembering, like, keep doing it. Just like Kobe was in there every day, just doing, the regular, most basic drills, because that kind of, those drills were allowed to help him, do other things above that. So for me, whatever mechanics kind of like, or like for me, it would be the way I work is like checklists, for instance, or, if you have sticky notes, or like what got you to where you are, what were those pieces that you built, or what yeah, what was the mechanics of you getting there? Everybody's a little bit different on, I love my sticky notes. I love getting up early. That's that kind of that drive. But here's another thing I would say too is like I still really love what I do. I'm still really excited about it, and I'm still really, for every kind of like, they talk about those the kind of the ideology or the people talk about those mountain peaks. Like you can't, if you feel that you've reached the top, well, you've reached that top and you're not going to grow anymore. So you're going to become complacent and, things like that. Sorry.
That's fantastic advice.
Yeah. But it's sort of like I always find that next mountain, that next peak, that next thing to keep you interested and keep you driving. And that for me is, I like little side projects, little side hustles, or diving, just finding interesting things to kind of keep me motivated and interested and kind of engaged. Like I'm almost too curious. I almost have too many tangents that I go off on, but that's really what kind of understand like how you got to where you are, but also keep setting those goals to kind of our interests to keep you moving forward as well.
Yeah. When you sit down with a client and you're you're getting ready to work on a project with them, as you're going along, are there things that you look for to see if this is going to be a little more of a rougher type project because of the client? Those are there like things you go, oh man, this company wants to do this way? Do you see like, for lack of best words, like warning signs of, like, wow, this is not going to be what it is, or, that type of stuff, like what is it that you kind of look for to know whether or not, hey, this one I'm going to have to be a little more hands-on than I normally would versus, because I know these people may not do the things that I need them to do to move this project forward.
Yeah, no, that's well, one of the kind of important things that we kind of lay out in the book is understand who you're working with, like ask questions. And that's, again, that comes down to that communication. And the contractor can interview the client as much as the client can interview the contractor. So not to say that we're picky about our clients, but it's also, we want to work with clients who are on that same page of being able to put in that same amount of work. So in that, it's really about understanding what drives them, and is it going to be a good fit, and that can it can go both ways. So as much as they want to interview us about, how we work, our process, we also want to start asking them the questions of, what are your goals, and what do you have in place to, if you were to reach a certain amount of success, what things do you have to kind of keep that success up, and how, what things do you have budgetary wise or human resources wise, like that you can put towards it, because nothing's worse than kind of like building something but not having the resources to kind of keep it rolling, right? So in that, we I would say to anybody that's on either side is just spend the time and get to know the designer, the contractor, or the client, because that's kind of, you gotta be on the same page. Otherwise, like you said, it will get really hard. It will get really cumbersome, and it's really tough working with people that you don't sort of like, you're not on the same page, you're not in the same energy. So that's kind of one of the biggest things is, as both you guys know too, like you guys have that same kind of the same outlook, or the same interests, right? So, and that's kind of that's really key. So just, I would say, slow down the process, interview and talk to the client, just open up that communication and just sort of see if it's a fit, because you really want them to be there long term as well. So and nothing's I'm sure you guys know, like nothing's worse than kind of working on a bad project or with a bad contractor. It really feels like a really bad situation and everything. You almost like wait for the project to be done, because into itself it can become very cumbersome. But flip that around, like how great do you feel when everything is just, you guys are in lockstep with with someone else, and it just feels like it just that relationship, the better, the closer you are, the more it fuels just that growth and the energy with it, and the more you build and the more you want to build, and that just they're it's you got just putting the right team around you. It's key to kind of being motivated, keeping motivated, and waking up and wanting to keep doing it. And a lot of my clients are very long term. So on both sides, it's like making sure it's a good fit, because you're going to have to work with them every day, or so that's really key.
Could not being on the same page affect creativity of what you're trying to do for a client?
Absolutely. Yeah, because it just from coming up with if again, it comes down to that, going back to that kind of research kind of answer, is that if they're willing to move in very in very short bursts, versus being really creative, it tends not to be a very interesting job, right? Where our goal too, and not just interesting, but also our goal is to market them so that they grow. And again, it comes down to what are their goals and what are their objectives in hiring someone like us, or hiring an agency or designer. Is it just to do something nice and pretty, or is it to kind of grow and accelerate the business? And that's kind of so we're talking about creativity also, is that the side of business growth. And kind of you can't be really creative and push things further if they're not willing to kind of push it as well. They just they're showing up and doing it, right? So it just doesn't become interesting, and you kind of lose a little bit of that creativity to it, right? So yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's a few segments we like to do towards the end of the podcast. Yeah. The first one is called No Dumb Questions. This is where an audience member is allowed to submit a question to a future guest. Yep. This week, the question is there any early warning signs when a project starts to go off the rails, or if there's something in the blind spot that we've missed that we can kind of implement?
For sure. There always is. And I was going to say, the first thing I'd say is, the second you see that, any kind of and if you get that little weird, tickle in your gut or something happens in a second, you're like, something doesn't, either it's verbiage in an email or just the way someone, we all know, we've all been in those situations where something just doesn't sort of smell right in a situation. I'd say right then and there, confront it. And that's because otherwise, if you don't know how wide or how deep that hole is going to go, and how far stuff is going to what you're going to get into. And that was the first thing I'd say, is just put a hard stop on it and just sort of clear the air. Understand, is it just miscommunication, or just get that realigned. But what I'd say is just clear that up. If you have a little, if any sort of, if you feel it kind of going off the tracks, just stop the train and bring everybody together and be like, here's what we're doing, and just sort of reassess everything. Again, it comes down to that communication, but don't be afraid to asking. Actually, to reverse it is there is no dumb question. So if you feel it's going off track, ask the contractor, because there is no dumb questions. Because if the answer is not what you want, or what was sort of what was promised, or anything else like that, you can put a hard stop to it. And yeah, I would say even I would answer your no dumb questions with, there are no dumb questions in that. Because just make sure, one of the best insights I received was from this very high level corporate negotiator, and he would be the guy that goes in when the company and the unions can't work it out. And one of the things that he said was one of his, I would say, tricks, but one of the things that he did is that he would approach both sides. But when he went to that other side, well, when he went in to talk to either the union or the company, he said, "Can you please explain your position as though I'm a 5-year-old? Just explain what you want and why, and all of these things. Just not pretend I'm dumb, but sort of can you just sort of let's back this up and just explain to me, very simple terms, how it works." And that, he said, what that did is just sort of help people not go too big, or not to try to explain things or explain out of things, but really just simplify everything, but also take the emotion out of it as well. It's there's no they need this, they need that, but it helped break it down to the simplest needs and wants of what both sides want. And I'm like, well, that's a really important thing to kind of carry through, because it's just, again, that just you can ask people, just like, if you don't know, say, hey, can you explain to me how this works? And that's been one of our biggest biggest things, because it'll allow them to explain and give them that space to explain in that. So that's what I would say, is like do a hard stop and everything, and just sort of just check in with everybody and make sure it's all, it's everybody's on that same page. And if not, do that realignment, or you can fix things from there. But if you go too far, things could get very costly. Like I said, it's either, time is money too, right? So yeah, so that's right. That's what I would answer it. Yeah.
What do you think it means to plan for what you don't see coming, and how do you explain to businesses that they should do that?
Well, I think we've all experienced those things where, if we just knew that one little thing, or if we just ask that one question at that time, being like,
Mhm.
oh, how much does this cost? Or rather than signing a contract, or what if this happens, and this, like, all those sorts of things. So I think, for hence how to plan for what you don't see coming is really about putting a check, like understanding a little bit of the broader, like, just get to know what the whole playing field is. To use a football analogy, it's like, if you don't understand what the offense or defense are going to do, if you haven't studied it, then really you have no idea what's gonna come in front of you. But if you've studied it and you kind of have a sense of it, just like, no one kind of knows it's going to happen after the snap, but because there's a lot there, but you narrow the risk on either side by just understanding. The more you know, the more decisions, or faster decisions you can make, or the better you get set up to, either defend or, create an opportunity to play. So in that's kind of I think I say, just understand, do your research and spend a little time there, because that's gonna kind of help. So do a little studying, things like that, and that's kind of, otherwise, who knows, you could, you'd be losing a Super Bowl here or there for that. So yeah, we've all seen those plays where something happens, and it's such a misalignment, and it creates such an opportunity for the other team, and it's just, mistakes happen, and that's kind of, yeah. So that's kind of what I'd say for that.
How does a potential client know, or what do they need to see in their business to know to reach out to someone like you to help them?
Great question. Part of this is, I'm just trying to get the word out there for this. It is, the book itself, it's marketing as a marketing book, but for the most part, it is, I'm just trying to get the word out there, because it's something that really not a lot of people talk about or have discussed, because I think there hasn't been enough people in, it just hasn't been, I don't know why it hasn't been talked about, but it's sort of, there's stuff out there. So for me, I'm part of my whole business plan and everything else with this book is really going into business schools and getting out there, being like, hey, here's practical insights in this. And it's kind of like, there is, we wish like those business mentors, you really wish you learned more from, but they never really wrote it down or did anything with their years of knowledge. So this is my kind of, the first piece into that of getting that. But anybody who is, this is written specifically for anybody who's starting a business, who's taking a business class or business course and is ready to start hiring somebody for the branding or marketing, and ready to kind of put the rubber to the road kind of thing. And that's really where this book lies, is helping. It's like the pilot in the cockpit with the checklist of just making sure everything's aligned, everything's all set up. And the book kind of covers everything from the pre-flight checks right through to how to land a plane kind of thing. And that's kind of that's what this kind of covers as well. So anybody that's that window of starting, or if you've started a business and ready to kind of build a bigger marketing team, or hire a marketing team who's had a bad experience with a marketing team, that's kind of where the book, that's where the window of this book fits.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
One final question on my end for you. If there was one thing you would want people that are listening to take away from this conversation, what would that be?
Oh boy. Oh no, that's stay informed, and it would be take your time and communicate would probably be the biggest one. And again, it's going back to it couldn't be more in line, but there's no stupid questions of just ask and take your time. Just the kind of when someone pitches, like even for instance, like I've heard a lot of bad experiences when someone suggests oh, I need somebody to do this, and someone like, oh, I've heard so and so does that. But if taking I would just say ask around and hire find the right person to hire, but also ask around and just that's something I would say. Just look at the depth of knowledge that people have around you, and just ask questions on who to hire. Get that's sorry. I'm trying to think of too many things all at once here, but that's just interview people and take your time and just be willing to kind of like just ask a lot of questions and just make sure you feel really comfortable with whoever you're hiring as well. So, and that's kind of like be informed, because the more informed you are, the more confident you can make with some of your decisions, and the more comfortable you feel with your decisions. So that's kind of the biggest thing, and that's kind of one of the things I was, offering as much as I possibly can throughout the book, so that you avoid those blind spots, and they don't sneak up on you, and you don't, fall into them or get hit by them. So, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Michael, do you have any last questions for Brady before we let him go today?
Yeah. So, you said you were, you've had an agency for 30 plus years and stuff. Yep. I am curious, when you first started, did you expect to become an author out of this?
I didn't. But I loved teaching. I loved sort of sharing what I had. So, and I got to say, I really thoroughly enjoyed the practice of it and learning something new. And that was something that's been super enjoyable as one gets to in one's life, if it's being constantly challenged. So not that I ever thought I was going to be an author, but this it's very interesting. You guys are doing this podcast, so it's you guys almost had a similar experience, like when you record your first one and when you edit it and do all that stuff. Did you ever assume it was going to take as much time or as much energy or effort that it did, right? And it's kind of, but what comes out of it is it's so satisfying, and you get to watch yourself and have people talk about it. Just like for me being here, like that's, for both of us to kind of meet, for me to create something and you to create something, and for us to kind of meet in the middle on this is such a, I wouldn't give that up. So all the time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears that I put into it, I don't think I'd ever kind of, give that up for not being able to do this. And this is such a reward for it. So for me, it's, and I really, Michael, to that point, I really kind of hope that, after, the next iteration of the book, there's always something that kind of, I find that next peak to kind of challenge myself with. And, so that was super interesting, but it's been so satisfying just to create, and the people that I meet, that it's, there's a lot going on here. I'm sure you guys are the same. Of just, I don't think I would never met you or all the other people that I come in contact with, or being able to kind of, affect their lives or help them. And that's truly rewarding on both sides. So, yeah.
That's incredible.
Very true.
Do you guys, anything else, or do you guys, it's
no, I mean, really, I just would like to ask you where people can find your book. Tell us a little more about the agency, like where people can connect with you there, and then anywhere else that people can find you, like whether you'd want to share social medias or not, that's completely up to you. Would love to find out a little more.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. And I have, I've been also offering sort of like any kind of help or mentorship that I can do as well. So the best place to find me, where I'm sort of sitting the most is usually on LinkedIn. So they can find me on LinkedIn, show notes or wherever else, but that's probably the best. And one of the things I've been offering as well is to show guests is like, if you're in a situation or you don't know how to handle something, just find me on LinkedIn, drop me a message and say, hey, here's my situation. can you help me? And it's what would you do? What would you do in this situation, and all that. So for any of the blind spots or any sort of business or marketing or branding issues that you have with a contractor or anything else, let me know, and I'll use all the my past experience for that. And then Blindspots Handbook is the website where you can find the book and all the more details on that, and I'll give you a link to where you can purchase it. And that's I keep it simple because it's just I don't spread myself out too far, because otherwise there's too many things going on. But LinkedIn also, if you follow me, I also produce a lot of content just to kind of like insights from the book, and everything that I learned, I kind of put up there. So it's almost the next iteration of the book where it's going to have more industries in it, more sort of creative industries in it. I share my insights as I'm following those as well. So it's almost like as I'm building it, I'm sharing that content so you can kind of learn in sync with me. So I produce a lot of valuable content, usable content on LinkedIn. It's beyond that. So that's probably the best place to kind of to find me. And I said, feel free to reach out if anybody has any any blind spots they get hit by and they don't know, they need some help recovering. More than happy to kind of help in all that. So
definitely appreciate that. Guys, make sure you check out Brady. Go follow Michael over on Huddle Card Collection, and then come over to Picksburgh so you can actually see the video format of this. Until next week, guys, we appreciate you listening to another episode, and may God bless you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Brady.